Many people have heard of the phrase Luddite, which is today means anti-technology.
Right.
It comes from the textile world. Explain.
Yeah. So the Luddites were the actual Luddites who used that term were men who were making really good money weaving on hand looms, not powered. And when powered looms came in, they feared unemployment and their wages went down and they were not happy and they started busting up looms. But what's interesting to me about the Luddites is they are latecomers because long before the Luddites are these great beneficiaries of the industrial production of thread because the industrial production of thread eliminated that thread used to be the the blockage. There was a shortage
Bottleneck.
of thread, the bottleneck, exactly. Thread used to be the bottleneck. There was a shortage of thread compared to the amount of cloth that could be woven because people were spinning all the time making as much thread as they could, and it was never enough. It was never enough. And you could say, well, why don't they just raise the wages? Well, you could do that, but then nobody could afford the cloth because it's so time consuming. So we got industrial spinning, we got the Industrial Revolution. Suddenly there's plenty of thread. It's no longer the bottleneck. Now the weaving is the bottleneck. The weaving is what people, and then the weavers started to make a lot of money, or, not by our standards, but
More
by
money.
more money. They were sort of industrial aristocrats. They made a lot of money. So when industrial spinning came in, there were, I guess we could call them proto-Luddites. There were people who were busting up those machines too, and attacking them, and they referred to them as patent machines because they had patents on them. And but that was basically the same thing. People had been making money spinning, and they didn't like it, and they didn't like the replacement, and so the Luddites were sort of latecomers. And then later, when the jacquard looms came in France, which at the time were considered a great advance because you could make complex patterns very easily all of a sudden. But at first, the weavers in Lyon, which was the great French textile center, ran Monsieur Jacquard out of town, even though he was honored by the government and such, because they were afraid for their livelihoods. Although it turned out that they eventually adopted the technology and they became sort of labor aristocrats, and Lyon became a center. The weavers were actually a potent sort of labor movement force